Om Tavakatam Ritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiritam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shri Madatatam Bhuvinirnantiye Burida Janaha. The nectar of few words, the praise of poet-seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears, cleanser of all sins, is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends. Tonight, we are on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and we left off last time on page 115. Before I continue, I'd just like to recap a little bit so that when we resume from where we left off, there'll be some continuity. So last time we spoke about developing an attitude of love toward God. And Ramakrishna mentioned 5 different attitudes. Attitudes intended to form a relationship with God. In fact, a very close relationship. And among them, we talked about Shanta, which is a serene attitude, an attitude of peacefulness, an attitude born out of understanding that God is the embodiment of everything, and we find peace in that, and we find that that's all we need to love God, just understanding that He is everything. There's also dasya, the attitude of a servant toward his master. We also talked about the attitude of friendship. In the case of friendship, formalities are no longer there. We are free to speak our mind, and we feel that we can open up all our feelings and any of our thoughts toward our friends, which we might otherwise hold back from people that we do not know as closely. And it's shared between friends. Vatsalya is the attitude of a mother toward her child. This is where we look on God as a child, and we are the mother. We look on God, we feel that we are responsible for that child. We look on all beings as children of God, and therefore we feel that kind of closeness toward all beings. And we look on God with that attitude, and we feel happy when we are thinking about God in that way. We also mentioned Madhur, the attitude of a woman toward her lover or paramour. In this case, the woman is always thinking of her lover, and if we thought of God that way, that would bring us closer toward God. One of the things I should mention, that amongst all of these attitudes, there is a particular emotion, I guess you might call it, that brings us closer to God, and that is the dearness that we feel toward our loved one. That is sort of what holds this relationship between you and God together. If we think about, in the case of Shanta, if we have that dearness toward God as complete basically, when you have that sense of peacefulness, we are resolved that everything is within God's. We trust God in everything. There is no need for us to go to counter his thoughts or counter his will. We find peace and just let him do as he will do. In the case of a servant, the servant will feel that the master, a servant will feel that they are dear to the master because the master is taking care of all their needs while they're also serving the master's needs. In the case of friendship, we hold friends dear to us. We don't want to feel that they are, even if a friend misbehaves with us, what holds that friendship together is how dear we feel that friend is to us. So even if something happens to that friend, it will hurt us and we will feel that we must do something to help because we hold that person dear. In the case of a mother and a child, that child is more dear to that mother than anything else. So much so that even if that child ended up in prison, even though that person might be abandoned by all others, by friends and other parts of other family members, that mother is the one that will most likely be the one, out of sense of dearness to that child, will continue to visit, even though it causes her so much pain and suffering. So even if God causes us all kinds of pain and suffering, if we can hold on to God with that kind of dearness, that can only help but to grow our love in the sense that perhaps God is teaching us something. So even developing that sense of dearness toward love for God can only help us through all kinds of other difficulties that we might face in life. And Sri Ramakrishna also says that God can only be seen with love eyes. In other words, not just love eyes or love mind, but a purified mind. A mind purified through spiritual discipline and through spiritual practices. Now the Master continues, but to maintain these attitudes, it's not possible without intense love of God. One sees nothing but God everywhere when one loves him with great intensity. It is like a person with jaundice who sees everything yellow. Then one feels, I am verily he. A drunkard, deeply intoxicated, says, verily I am Kali. The gopis, intoxicated with love, exclaimed, verily I am Krishna. One who thinks of God day and night beholds him everywhere. In this case, both the drunkard and even the gopis, they have lost their individual egos. And if they are thinking of God, that's the sole thought in their mind. They cannot think of themselves. In fact, if you intensely love someone or something, that sense of self that you have completely vanishes for that period of time. So the gopis, in this case, when they are intoxicated with love, exclaimed, verily, I am Krishna. Because they see Krishna both within themselves and outside of themselves. They have lost themselves in thinking of Krishna. And Sri Ramakrishna says, one who thinks of God day and night will see him everywhere, will behold him everywhere. When one sees God day and night, that also means they have purified the mind to the point where they have the love eyes to see God. They have the love body to experience God. Then he continues, it is like a man's seeing flames on all sides after he has gazed fixedly at one flame for some time. This is sometimes experienced when someone looks at the light at the end of an incense stick. And by concentrating on that light, it's almost like that light eventually fills the room. I remember a story I read once, baseball story, where a batter, standing at bat, concentrates on the ball as the pitcher starts to wind up. At that point, as the ball is released, he's looking at that ball, and as he concentrates more on that ball, he notices that all the sounds in the arena become quiet. As the ball approaches him at, 90 miles an hour, he can see the stitches on the ball, he knows how it's spinning, but more miraculously, he sees that ball bigger than in real life, even at the point where he feels that it's easy to hit that ball. Some have described it the size of a grapefruit by the time they hit that ball. And they can even tell that they can see the stitches, they can see how the ball is spinning, and they know how to hit the ball. Well, is the ball really that size? Well, no, it's just, we all know the physical size of a baseball, but when intensely concentrated on, it takes on a different life. And so when Sri Ramakrishna has said, if a man sees flames it is like a man who sees flames on all sides after he has gazed at one flame for some time. But then M is thinking, but that isn't the real flame. No, the real flame was just that single flame. Sri Ramakrishna, who could read a man's inmost thoughts, said, one doesn't lose consciousness by thinking of him who is all spirit, all consciousness. Shivanath once remarked that too much thinking about God confounds the brain. Thereupon I said to him, how can one become unconscious by thinking of consciousness? So before we had M questioning that the only real flame was that single flame, but what about all the multiple flames that one might experience? Those are all imaginary. But one is concentrating on that one single flame, and as a result, sees flame everywhere. If one concentrates on consciousness, one sees consciousness everywhere. If one concentrates on intelligence, cosmic intelligence, they will see that cosmic intelligence everywhere. So M continues, yes, sir, I realize that. It isn't like thinking of an unreal object. How can a man lose his intelligence if he always fixes his mind on him whose very nature is eternal intelligence? So we can fix our mind on imaginary things, or we can fix our mind on things related that are true. Now, the only true flame was a single flame. Consciousness and intelligence are both true aspects of God, as opposed to us concentrating on some imaginary things that are just concoctions of our mind, or some fantasies that we have. But if we are concentrating on some aspect of God that is part of his true nature, then we realize that. So the Master continues, and he says, with pleasure, it is through God's grace that you understand that. The doubts of the mind will not disappear without his grace. Doubts do not disappear without self-realization. But one need not fear anything if one has received the grace of God. It is rather easy for a child to stumble if he holds his father's hand. But there can be no such fear if the father holds the child's hand. This is quite apparent if you go to an ice rink and you see how the parents take care of their children on the ice. At first, a child might be quite scared, but with encouragement, the parent will try to hold up their child's hand, take it and help them glide on the ice. But at first, you'll see that the parent is holding the child's hand, and the child's holding on with dear life. At first, you'll see that the parent is just putting the hand out there, the child's just holding on. And then if the child is struggling too hard, is finding it too difficult, then the parent will grab the child's hand or their body and then just help it propel along the ice. So you'll see that, well, for a whole hour you might find the child hasn't done anything, but the parent has been guiding them around on the ice the whole time. So much so that when you get off the ice, the child will almost brag and say, I was skating today. Well, really they didn't do anything, but by the grace of the parent, that child felt they were doing everything. So there was no fear under those circumstances. But if the child is trying to hold onto the parent or some object, out of fear they are stumbling, they're falling, they cry, and so it goes like that. So yes, when you can feel that God is holding your hand, guiding you in all your activities, there's no fear. You have complete faith, complete trust in whatever God is going to do with you or do to you. So a man does not have to suffer anymore if God, in his grace, removes his doubts and reveals himself to him. But his grace descends upon him only after he has prayed to God with intense yearning of heart and has practiced spiritual discipline. The mother feels compassion for her child when she sees him running about breathlessly. She has been hiding herself. Now she appears before the child. Sometimes at the ice rink, you'll find that people are practicing different things. They're goofing around. They're not taking anything really that seriously. But those that actually try and persist, trying to practice something, I find myself that those are the ones I will approach and give some tips to and help out. Those that are just wandering around having fun and not really paying attention to what they're doing, well, let them do that. But those that take it more seriously, those are the ones, those that actually are trying to practice, just as one does their spiritual practices, someone will come along and provide some advice or give some help. So by that grace depends upon him only after he has prayed to God with intense yearning of heart and practiced spiritual discipline. So yes, you have to make effort if you want to get any help from anybody. That's basically it. So if you actually desire help in your spiritual practices, you have to make sincere effort also. And then help will come in the form of a guru, or perhaps you hear some inspirational words that suddenly click and help you out. So the mother feels compassion for her child when she sees him running about breathlessly. She has been hiding herself, and now she appears before the child. But M is thinking, but why should God make us run about? Well, immediately Sri Ramakrishna said, it is his will that we should run about a little. Then it is great fun. So even at the ice rink, you let the people that want to play on the ice, let them run around. They fall down, sometimes they get hurt. And maybe then after that, they take it a little more seriously and stop trying to use their phone all the time while they're playing on the ice. How many phones I've seen fall and break, and then how many people have tripped over their toe picks because they're staring at their phones. Well, they haven't taken it seriously. When we go around life enjoying all the things of life, we don't take spiritual practice seriously, not until we've had our knocks, and then we stop and think. And then that's all part of the play, as Swami Ramakrishna says. So God has created the world in play, as it were. Well, here he uses the word as it were. It's play to him, but it's suffering for us. But yet it's still looking like God's play. It's a play that we don't understand. We can't claim to understand it. We don't know why. We have no understanding of it. And yet that is something that we can add to our prayers. Please, God, help us to understand your play. And in so doing, we also learn to understand our role in this play. So he continues, this is called Mahamaya, the great illusion. Therefore, one must take refuge in the Divine Mother, the cosmic power itself. It is she who has bound us with the shackles of illusion. The realization of God is possible only when those shackles are severed. This is only possible through spiritual practice, through developing love of God, attachment to God, through those attitudes, those relationships that were discussed earlier. And that will bring us closer to God, to the point where we feel that God is dear to us under all circumstances. We won't let go of God, no matter what happens to us in life, through the joys, through the sufferings, because God will be there as our ultimate refuge when we feel that everyone else has abandoned us. Unfortunately, that is also part of all of this great Mahamaya, the pleasures and the pains of the world. But when we take refuge in God, in the Divine Mother, those pains are eased. The suffering is reduced because we would also develop a more peaceful attitude, thinking that God is doing this for our own benefit because we grow more out of the sufferings than out of all our joys. We also develop an attitude of service toward God. These attitudes are not just watertight compartments. At various times in our life, and even within the same day, we will go through all these different attitudes. And these are not the only attitudes. There are also other attitudes. Here we have described the attitudes of love. But there are also, in a case like Ravana, he looked on God as his enemy and was always plotting against his enemy. So here you are, it is still, he's thinking of God day and night, how to confound God, how to look on Rama as God. So this is also a valid path. But here in this case, Ramakrishna is talking about different attitudes of love. So I will stop there today because the next part, the Master will continue on, he continues with how to propitiate the Divine Mother, and we will continue with that next week. So thank you very much for attending, and I do not see any questions as of yet. I will conclude with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Tritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Paramesamityam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.